Extension Director here in Indiana, and he joins us on the telephone this morning. And he's left 479-1160 open for you to call if you have a question for Bob this morning. So 479-1160. Bob is on our other line this morning. Good morning.
Good morning. How are you today?
Just lovely. And yourself?
Just fine.
Oh, that's terrific news. All right, so let's get down to things here. We've been talking in recent weeks about getting your yard in particular ready for the fall and then the winter that is coming. We've been talking a lot about fertilizing and soil testing. And one of the things that we've spent just a little bit of time on is we wait to see if anybody's going to call with a question this morning is spots that have become damaged over the summer and bare spots that have developed on the lawn. We've talked about, okay, they need to be reseeded now. Tell me about soil preparation, how folks are supposed to go about that, and what sorts of seed they should be planting.
Well, yeah, as far as seed goes, you want to try and match up the seed with what you have.
So I should look for crabgrass seed?
Yes, yeah, the grass seed. Yeah, unless you have a weed patch that's green, then you can just let the weeds take care of that and fill in. But try to match that seed up as best you can. Most of the seed that you would go to the store to purchase is a mixture. So it's going to have several different varieties of seed in there. And then within that, it may have one or two or three different specific cultivars. If we just use Kentucky bluegrass for an example, most of any mix that you buy that you're going to put in sunny location will have Kentucky bluegrass in it. And it'll say that on the label, and it'll give you the percentage within that bag based on the weight of the bag, the container, of how many pounds or ounces of seed are in that container of, it may say 20% or 30% Kentucky bluegrass. And then underneath that, if there are specific named cultivars, and they could be numbered as well, it could be a numbered cultivar or a named cultivar, it'll list those there and the percentages of those that are in that bag.
Mm-hmm.
And then it might have perennial ryegrass, fescue, and then there'll be a little line there that says inert ingredients and a percentage there. But just try to, if your lawn is predominantly Kentucky bluegrass, then you want to pick a mix that is also predominantly that. What can happen is, especially when you're doing spots, is if you just pick up any run-of-the-mill bag of grass seed, it may not match up with what you have, and so those spots will become very noticeable as soon as that grass germinates and start to grow.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So, to hedge your bets, as long as you look on the bag and if it's in a sunny to partly sunny location, then something with Kentucky bluegrass is the highest percentage, or at least equal to, say, perennial rye and fescue that might be in there. And perennial ryegrass is another one that will commonly be in those mixes, and then a lot of them will also have annual ryegrass in there. And so it's an annual, so the seed will germinate, grow, and then when we get to cold temperatures and freezes, that'll die out. Or it'll grow, go to seed, and then that plant will die. Mm-hmm. And that's in there for a purpose, and it's in there because it germinates very quickly. So it can germinate within days versus the Kentucky bluegrass, which might take 2 weeks to germinate.
Mm-hmm.
So that way you've got something in there that will germinate quickly, get a cover, get things started, help keep the weeds from also that are going to germinate at the same time, suppress them a little bit, and then give time for the other species in that mixture to germinate and start to grow.
All right, now let me ask you about the actual place where you're planting this seed. Is there a difference in technique or in things that I should do for bare ground versus a patch that has died over the summer, say 3 feet by 3 feet or smaller than that, and there's just brown dead grass where normally there would be growing grass. Bare soil versus dead grass.
Yeah, so where you have that sod that's there that died out for whatever reason, it'd be good to try to get the sod off of there. And once it's dead, it's easier to, if you have a good hard rake, that usually is enough that that grass will be dead enough that you can rake it hard, and that will get that debris off of there and expose the soil underneath. Now, it may be a little bit depressed or that you need to add some soil to that.
Mm-hmm.
It's always good to work the soil up lightly. You don't have to work it very deep, only a quarter to half an inch. We're just trying to get some loose, nice, even soil there so that when you plant the seed, that seed has a place to kind of get tucked down in that soil and amongst it, and then firm that up so that seed can be in contact with the soil. It will germinate quicker that way. If it's just laying on top, it's much more difficult for that to take in enough moisture so that it germinates and starts to grow.
Mm-hmm.
So get that roughed up. If you have to take a spade or to loosen the soil up, and that's, one reason you might have a dead patch is because there was compaction there. So in that case, you do need to take a spade and work the soil up a little bit to loosen that up and break up those soil particles. Because still, if you don't, then the same problems, you haven't solved your problem, you've just introduced some new seed on the same surface, which is compacted, and it's going to be tough for that grass to grow there.
Mm-hmm.
So just working that up. It's easier when you have bare soil or a whole area or a whole yard you're going to do, because you are going to work that whole thing up, loosen it up, and then that's the time too. If you don't know what your nutrient levels are there in that area, now when you're doing spots, it's hard to do that. You just need to work it up and go back at it, and you would use when you soil sample, you'd just do the whole area. If you're doing the whole yard, then before you plant, as you're working the soil, or you bring in new soil, because you may have a new house that you have to you're doing the yard for the first time. In a lot of cases, you really need to look and see whether there is topsoil there. So during that whole construction process, was the soil scraped off, and maybe it was hauled out of there, so you have to bring all new soil in, or was it piled up and then respread after they did the final subgrade and then spread the topsoil back over it. But in any case, it's good to do your soil testing then, so that if you need to amend it, especially with phosphorus, potassium, calcium, magnesium, those nutrients, and if you need to adjust the soil pH, that's the time to do it, because you can apply those materials, get them worked into the soil, and then make your seed bed and plant your seed.
Bob Pollock is with us this morning here on Indiana in the Morning, presented by First Commonwealth Bank, WCCS AM 1160 and FM 101.1. Final question for you today, and this comes from something I noticed yesterday when I was at a high school cross-country match, and they were all lining up to start the race, and it just looked like normal grass, but there was a spot that had collected water from the rain, and it was all marshy, and somebody got a wet foot out of it. A couple of people got wet feet out of it. When you've got areas like that, it looks like a really nice patch of lawn, but there's some source of water there that has caused it to sponge up on you. Are there things that you can do beyond actually finding the source of the water and somehow diverting it?
Yeah, depending on the situation, you might be able to just build that area up. Maybe it's just over time it might be just a natural little swale there, or through activity that could have happened. And so sometimes just adding some new soil to that, re-leveling that around, that may be enough. that when it does rain or moisture comes in that area, raising that low spot up to the other grade may be enough just that water will then naturally move. It's going to move somewhere else. Hopefully it can move far enough that it doesn't create another spot or pool up somewhere else.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, other than, if it's a permanent thing where it's a really, if there's a drainage issue there, if the other places are better drained or that just is the low point, then you may have to look at something more permanent there, a drain of some sort, digging and putting a drain in to get that water out of that area completely into somewhere more appropriate.
Yeah, I think the kid with the wet foot did not finish first place. Just saying.
He might have been carrying some extra weight with him.
Running with a soggy shoe is just not good. Bob, thanks for being with us. Thanks for joining us here this morning. Appreciate it.
Hey, you are welcome. Have a good weekend.
You too. We'll see you.